Welcome to our 7th BSME lockdown lunch. Can't believe we've done 7 already. We're going to be discussing today how magazines can begin to make themselves and their products truly more diverse. So today, if you don't know me already, I'm Maria Pieri. I'm the BSME 2020 chair and also editorial director for National Geographic Traveller UK. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by Busola Evans, associate editor and supplements editor of Livingetc and Homes and Gardens, Amit Katwala, senior editor of only live of Wired UK, and Samantha McClary, editor of Estates Gazette, and Andrea Thompson, editor-in-chief of Marie Claire. I'm going to go through everyone and just want to ask you all to just say your titles one more time and just say hi to everyone, because as the attendees are going up, they're just going up and up, and it's nice so everyone knows who you are. So if I start off with Busola, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hello everyone, I'm Busola Evans. I'm associate editor and supplements editor of Livingetc and Homes and Gardens.
Thank you. Samantha?
Hi everyone, Sam McClary from EG, Estates Gazette, the editor there, and I hope to be bringing a B2B voice to the conversation today.
Thank you. Amit?
Hi, I'm Amit Katwala. I'm a senior editor at Wired magazine, primarily looking after culture.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Andrea?
Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm editor-in-chief at Marie Claire.
Thank you. So this is obviously a topic that's been bubbling up in the media very much so over the last month or so. And it's also one that was on our agenda anyway to cover. So it seemed very prevalent to bring it forward. So I suppose we have to ask the question that we started off with right at the beginning, which is, why do you think that the media is still so white, and what can be done to fix it? Which is a massive question all in one. So if I start, I think I'm going to just start I'll start bottom up this way from my screen. So Andrea, do you want to start with why do you think that we're in the position that we're in at the moment? Why is media so white as such?
I think there's so many different reasons, but the first one is perhaps about role models. Certainly when I was getting into the media, there weren't many people that looked like me at the helm of magazines and newspapers. And when I go into schools to talk to young girls about careers in media, often they'll say, well, I don't really feel that it's for people like me or that look like me. And I think there's a fear that they might actually have to hide a part of who they are in our profession. It feels like an exclusive profession that is not as welcoming as it could be for people from different backgrounds. I think there's also an issue with hiring practices. Often, on interview panels, there'll be, an all-white panel. I think, people want to hire people that look like them. And actually, that doesn't appeal to somebody who's coming along to a job to feel that they might be in that environment. I think we have a duty as companies to, give a platform to people from different backgrounds within our organisation, so that people from the outside can see we exist and see that there are people like them within our industry. There's also a lot of work to be done in, looking at how we educate our teams around promoting people from different backgrounds who are different from themselves, and acknowledging their own privilege as well, and how they can check that and look at the obstacles that people from outside their own background are up against.
Fantastic, thank you. Amit, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think what I would add to that, I agree obviously with all those points, but what I would add is that I think I think that this is an exclusive industry. I think Andrea is right to kind of say that, and it's a very difficult industry to get into. And I think that the barriers the industry puts up don't make it easy for people from ethnic minorities to maybe get into the industry. There's, and I think things have improved in the last few years, but 10, 15 years ago when I was coming into the industry, I think there was this kind of expectation that you would have to work unpaid for 6 months or a year in London. And I think that immediately closes the barrier, raises the barrier to a lot of people from, not just from ethnic minority groups, but from all over the country. And I think that maybe there's a view in certain cultures, and it's kind of driven by this, that this is kind of a luxury career, and actually not everyone can afford to take a year off, unpaid to kind of make the connections that they need to make to kind of get a paid job in magazines. So I think that's another big barrier that we need to address.
Yeah, that's true. And Sam, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think, I absolutely agree with Andrea and Amit. And I think when I think back to when I was at J School 400 years ago, or however long ago that might have been, and I looked around the classroom, and it was a very diverse group of us who were studying to become journalists. But then I do look around the business I'm in today, and it definitely isn't as diverse. So I think that there's a desire to be a journalist from whatever background you might be, but we do have this blockade perhaps in the hiring process. So I think the fixing needs to come there. And I'm sure all of us have been through unconscious bias training and have learned a lot more about ourselves, so that trying not to hire people that look like, for me not hiring people that look like me, I have to think about that much harder going forward.
Okay, thank you. Busola, don't worry, I'm not going to leave you at the end of the time, so I was going to ask you the next question straight after. So anything to add to that, but also, what do you think that we can do to fix it?
And I think all the points that I would have said have been raised. I think that there is an issue right from the beginning, from education, from, even the attitudes of some teachers about young Black people or ethnic minorities wanting to go into journalism. I remember my careers teacher when I was at school was not particularly encouraging, and wanted me to sort of do something else. I think it was sort of nursing or something, I can't remember. And sometimes it's about low expectations, and also it's about people of colour knowing that the industry is for them, and there is a role in the industry. And if you don't want to be a writer, you could be a designer, you could be a sub, you can do all the different roles within our industry are there, and it's important that we let people know that this is available. Let young people of colour know that those opportunities are there. I think there are huge flaws in our general hiring practices. I think it almost seems to have got worse, actually. I think with lack of money to advertise with lots of magazines now, and we have seemingly resorted to really lazy ways of getting people. Sort of nepotism is rife. You have managers and editors just sort of employing people who are just mirror images of themselves and not being pulled up on it. You have sort of panels of all white panels, and it's difficult, and all these things are issues that need to be looked at.
So that's I think I'll pick up on the hiring issue, because you've all covered such excellent points, and it's obviously such a broad subject. But I think if we start off with perhaps the hiring issue, how do you think that we can fix it ourselves as the first step in terms of hiring? I mean, from my perspective, I tend to, especially for designers, I know because we've been hiring designers recently, I tend to just judge it on the work. I allow my team to present to me their 3 candidates, and I tend to look at the work that they produce and then do it from that basis. I don't often look at names or CVs at that point. But then I wonder whether I need to step in earlier at the hiring process and then look perhaps how they're getting to that stage. So that's just from our perspective. What would you suggest? Who would like to step in on that one?
I mean, I will. I think that we need to widen our pool when we're looking for talent. And, I agree with Busola. The current climate means that often we're in a rush, we're up against deadlines and budgets. And what we do is we ask somebody if they know somebody. That's, or, have you worked with anybody recently? And you're just sort of hiring in this tiny pool of people who are all within the industry and know each other, rather than looking further afield, because you haven't got time to go through, hundreds of CVs. But the thing is, it's so important to look at the sort of places where talent might be outside this little circle, and draw people from different backgrounds, and people who haven't been, worked with people at your publication before. I think you can do that. There's ways of doing that through LinkedIn, through, if you're hiring junior members of the team, to approach inner city universities and schools for when you're looking for interns and junior staff, and also working with some of the like sort of black organisations within our industries that advertise that talent. Also, even things like best, the FT does a sort of best black under 30 type list where you can go and look for people who are within different pools to tap into.
Thank you. Amit, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think just trying to work with as many new people as possible is like really important. I think that it's very easy to, when you're pressed for time, to just fall back into kind of using the same freelancers or kind of just relying on the kind of same people. And I think that, from my point of view, where I'm probably more involved in kind of commissioning freelancers rather than actually hiring new employees, I think that I've made a real effort to try and contact just as many new people as possible. And I think when you do a call for pictures, maybe try and put it in a place where it's going to be seen by people who wouldn't ordinarily see it. So people that might not be in those networks of people you would normally use, whether that's, approaching colleges in certain areas or approaching, there's lots of kind of social media accounts set up for writers of colour and things like that. So I think that's really important.
Busola, you were talking about earlier about the fact that actually even when prior to that hiring process, people may not even think about actually stepping forward and putting themselves forward into this industry. How might the industry look at reaching out to those people, at that point in their career, rather than them thinking this is not for me? How do we reach them at that point? Any ideas on that?
Yeah, well, I think we reach them at various points. So, I think we start with the sort of mentorship, going into schools, talking to young, 15, 16-year-olds who are at that point in their lives where they're sort of making decisions about what they want to do career-wise, or at least thinking about it. So it starts from that point. It starts with internships, so allowing people to come in for work experience. And when we're hiring, we've talked about the ways that, we should be hiring, and we should sort of widen the lens, but also just making sure that your advert is, says it's inclusive. I remember when I was starting out, and, sort of jobs at the BBC and Channel 4 would always say, sort of we're equal opportunities employers, or we particularly look forward to sort of hearing from ethnic minorities. These things actually matter. Because I know that when I would apply for, when I'd see those jobs, I would think, oh, right, okay, I'm more likely to get a fair, a fair look at my CV and, a sort of a good chance. This is not about favoritism. It's just having a level playing field that you feel that you actually have a chance of showing what you're able to do.
And Sam, since you've, as you pointed out earlier, you've noticed it more and are trying to be more open about how you are now hiring. What are the main changes that you've made in the hiring process, or that you're considering to make? I know everything's happened so quickly over the last few months. I think everyone's like, okay, what do we do? How do we do it?
Yeah, I think, one, it's trying very hard to be more aware. And I think also it's looking at things like incentives that we might have in a business to hire people. I think quite a lot of firms have a reward program if you bring someone new to the business. And I had a very interesting chat not long ago about actually they can be a real barrier to making your workforce more diverse, because we do, the people we know often are people like us. So actually those incentive systems, maybe we need to look at those again and change that to be bringing different backgrounds into the industry. And I think along with that, and nepotism has been already mentioned, when we look at work experience, I know there's a lot of programs out there where people are running a one-for-one work experience program, whereas if you might get someone in who is a friend of a friend or an offspring of a friend, you also work with a social mobility charity perhaps to bring someone else who wouldn't have that opportunity. So I think it's things like that we can all do to open our eyes a little bit more and open our horizons to better talent.
Yeah, Absolutely. And in terms of things like internships, if, for example, those internships are longer than a couple of weeks and obviously some may be unpaid, that's obviously another barrier to entry. So what can the industry do? How can we tackle it? And what maybe are you guys doing now that you're aware of it to improve things? Andrea, maybe?
Well, I mean, at Marie Claire, we always try to look at having a cross-section of different people at the intern stage, and we recruit from lots of different places that ensure that we do have that diversity. You know, moving forward, I think it's just really important that we get rid of this whole idea of unpaid internships for a start, which are just so, I mean, they exclude huge swathes of people from all sorts of backgrounds that don't have rich parents, houses to stay with in London, or just parents to stay with in London. But I also think that the people that we do hire, we pay a fair living wage so that they can actually stay on in that internship for a year and complete it and get the experience that they need. Because as we all know, I mean, internships are the route to our industry. And, you know, in order for them to be inclusive, our industry to be more inclusive, we need to pay properly for those roles so that people stay in them. I've had really good interns who have been with me a while and left because they can't afford to remain in that role. So I think it's really about making sure that happens.
What happens at Wired, Amit? What in terms of internships and stuff?
We have 6 month interns, so we kind of have rolling 6 month internships, which are paid. Obviously, I think we'd like to pay them more, but I think so. Yeah, I think it's really important that internships are always paid. I think even if they're only 2 weeks, I think they should be paid, because I think that if you can. Like it shouldn't. I don't think it should cost people money to work.
No, absolutely.
You know, a friend of mine, when she was getting into the industry, was working, you know, in the evenings and sharing a room with her cousin while she was doing internships, you know, in newspapers, which isn't really feasible for most people to do. So I think that's really important. I wonder if we need to go further, though. If we need to start, you know, setting aside internships for people from certain groups and saying, you know, this spot is reserved for someone from an underrepresented group, and actually kind of proactively kind of trying to increase the numbers of people that are coming in via that mechanism.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult route to take. I can understand why it's not popular, why it might step forward, but then you don't want to do it as a positive, how shall I say, a positive action as well in some respects. Sam, what about you guys? What are you doing in terms of internships? How are you trying to make them as fair as possible?
Sadly, we at Estates Gazette might not be quite as attractive as Marie Claire and Wired. So we don't have a long list of people who want to come and do internships with us. So we don't actually have currently a formal internship program, but we do get people coming in for work experience from time to time. And I have to say, we actually have to do more, because we probably look to City University for people on a magazine or newspaper course there, and we haven't done enough to work harder at getting different voices in. So I will put my hand up there and say there is so much more to be done, and that's something I need to put some time aside to work harder on.
Okay, thank you. And Busola, if we're spending that time doing those internships, what else can we do? What about things like mentorship programs? How easy are they to start up or look at or consider?
Well, I think mentorship is really, really important. I mean, the thing is, you know, these things are not easy fixes. You know, we all have to give time. We have to sacrifice time. But I think that there are lots of programs now that will connect you with students and pupils and people that you can help and mentor along the way. And you know, you can always. I mean, obviously, there's sort of very formal and official routes, but you can just do that as a journalist, just sort of, take young people under your wing and give them advice. I mean, I haven't always done it in a formal sort of situation, but throughout my career, I have very much done that, particularly with, the younger people of colour I've seen coming up. I've knowing how difficult it can be. I sort of try to sort of take them under my wing. I was very lucky when I went on, when I started out. I had work experience at The Guardian, and I met Gary Young, and he was really brilliant in just taking me under his wing and being encouraging and, giving me my first byline in The Guardian and that sort of thing. So I've always taken that and sort of thought, right, that's the way to do things. So we can, it doesn't have to always be a formalized thing. It's about being aware and being encouraging and being and empowering the sort of people coming through and being generous with your time. I think that's really important.
Do any of the other panelists do any form of mentorship, or do they have any tips or ideas on how they can become, anyone in the industry can become involved in creating mentorships?
I've done several mentorships, and I must say I've also learned so much from mentoring other people. There's a sort of reverse situation that goes on. Mm-hmm. But I also think that as well as mentoring one person and being able to give them that encouragement and raise their confidence, it's really good if we can, as Busola said, be more giving of our time. I go into schools and I talk to young girls specifically about breaking into the industry, and I through a network called Future Leaders speak to predominantly Black girls in inner city areas as well, and to just go in and talk to them and do these sort of things regularly and talk about, be really realistic about the obstacles they might be up against, but also inspire them that they can push to break into these sort of careers. Can be a really powerful thing, because we all know somebody who inspired us when we were younger, and I think it's just about being out there and showing people and being a role model and making yourself visible and giving them that confidence to look to these careers in a way that perhaps they wouldn't before, because they felt that they didn't belong there.
And taking this on to the next step, how do we feel we're a panel of 5, how do we feel about our industry? Do we feel that have we experienced racism? Do we feel that actually it is, as we've said, that the magazine sector is too white, the media sector is too white? I mean, have you ever experienced anything like where you think, we really need to change this? I've experienced this. This isn't a pleasant place to have experienced it. Yeah,
I don't think that, in terms of like overt racism, I don't think I've experienced a lot of that in the magazine industry. I probably wasn't very attuned to it in the sense that I don't think I necessarily would attribute things to that if there was any other alternative explanation that I thought was reasonable. I don't think it was something that I was particularly desperate to kind of point out early on in my career. What I think is more damaging, actually, maybe than kind of overt stuff, is the kind of stuff that you don't find out about. The jobs that you don't get shortlisted for because of your name, or the interviews that you don't get offered because of the way you look, or that kind of thing, or even like the work experiences that you don't get because they've gone to someone whose dad was friends with the editor. Like that, those are the kind of things where I think it's really insidious, and it's the kind of structural stuff that actually is almost more damaging than the stuff that you might be able to point out and say that is a problem. I think it's those kind of things that we really need to address if we want to make the industry more equal. And Sam,
would you say you've noticed it either one way or the other? I mean,
well, I can't comment on experiencing racism, of course, but I can, I have experienced sexism as a female editor in the industry I work in. It's a very male-dominated industry in real estate, and you get a few like, a female editor, and I'm sure if I wasn't white skinned, those raised eyebrows would be a bit higher. So while I can't comment on the racism side of thing, I can see it, but I obviously have not experienced it.
And how would you say how do you see the industry in terms of in your sector? Is it improving? I think that's probably more apt for your question.
Slowly, really slowly, but they're trying very, very hard. And I think, as the next generation comes through, it's that the speed of change is going to step up. I think now there is a very obvious need for people to change, and that is from not just a human perspective, but also from a business perspective. I think people have realized that, you know, this matters on every single level. Absolutely.
Busola, in your sector, have you experienced it? Do you think it's improving?
I think sort of the issue of diversity in magazines, actually, I'll say controversially that I don't think it's improving. I've been in the industry for 20 years. I think there was improvement, but I think that in the last 10 years, I think we've just stagnated. I just don't think that things are progressing the way they should be. We do obviously have very high profile appointments within magazines, and people think, oh, brilliant, you know, we've got this person, and that's a sign that everything is loads better and honky-dory. But the reality is, if you take a picture of most of the editorial teams of our, you know, sort of magazines, they're almost always, you know, sort of very white. And so that's an issue. I don't think the numbers of sort of people of colour have changed dramatically within that. And also, if you even slice that up and look at the people who are in positions of power, the people who are, you know, making the decisions, the people on the high salaries, again, you know, that would probably become exclusively white. There is a problem, and things are not progressing the way they are, the way they should be. I mean, I'm relatively hopeful with this sort of, you know, this wave of interest, this momentum that we have at the moment, that people will start to question things more and look at things more, and not just sort of serve to hold up the sort of status quo, and actually, you know, sort of be a bit more, you know, sort of questioning about everything around them, and not just sort of take it as standard and how it should be.
Yes, I mean, if we were to perhaps consider some of the conferences that we go to, or consider the main speakers at those conferences, I think we can safely say that, you know, it's not working as well as we'd like it to be working, because many of the people speaking at those conferences, it does tend to be quite well white and male, actually, at the senior level, not even female, some female. So there you go. In terms of if I move on to Andrea, do you think in your sector it's improving? Would you agree with Busola that actually at the senior level that, you know, there's still a lot of work to do, even if we get past that entry level?
Yeah, I agree. I do think there's been some improvement. I do think that the current situation offers us a huge opportunity to change, and we should seize on it and start making systematic changes, not sort of virtue signalling, some proper changes. However, I agree. The last 10 years, you know, although from the beginning of my career to now, I see definitely more diversity in the industry. I do believe the last 10 years, it's very little has changed. And I think that, you know, in my career, and as I'm sure this is a very shared experience, that, you know, as the only person of colour, or one or two of people in colour in every publication that you work or social setting, you carry this burden of having to be the spokesperson for the whole thing. You know, it's like,
yeah,
now so somebody's going to target a question at me, and I'm supposed to speak for the whole BAME group, which is problematic anyway, lumping it all together. Well, what do you think, Andrea? You know, and it's so ridiculous that that's still the case, you know, at this time. And I think, you know, where we are now is a time for sort of open, honest conversations. It's time to stop being embarrassed about talking about it. I mean, I know so many really good meaning people that feel just that they might use the wrong terms. They have a fear about discussing the issue in general. And I think it's time to just say, look, let's get it on the table. Let's just talk about these issues, and let's acknowledge the privilege that some of us have in the industry and some of us don't have, and let's address them, and from that very honest place, start making some changes. So I am again optimistic. I hope this is a watershed moment for us.
That's great actually really great to hear, because even I said to you guys at the beginning, I was like, I'm sort of a bit nervous about this topic because people have such strong views, and when you're trying to be well-meaning, you often put your foot in it, don't you? You kind of put your foot in it worse, in fact, when you're trying to be well-meaning.
We had somebody come in to do unconscious bias training with us, fantastic girl. I'd really recommend Abadesia Sunset, and she runs Hustle Crew, and they go into organisations and they basically do training around these very issues. And she came in, I organised for her to come in, talk to our team, and just have a really open discussion about the barriers that they face, how they feel about it. And to talk about how we can all work together to make this situation better, how allies can get on board and what that looks like, amplifying Black voices in your business and within the media as a whole, pointing out, calling out things that you see that are not quite right, in the way that we ask male allies to get on board, with the feminist movement. It's about including everybody in this journey and having really open, honest discussions so that we can move things forward instead of it being buried away and not talked about.
That's excellent. That's a great valid point there. So if I can then address that to Amit, what would you add to that and say, if there's one thing, if you were to suggest or comment on, say, one or two things that you can do right now, even in your own organisation or for others to consider, what is it that you would recommend? I think having an open conversation like that, as Andrea suggested, even with bringing somebody in to do that for us, is an excellent starting point. What else can we do?
I think that one really important thing is to just the only way you can know that you're improving is if you assess where you're at, right? So I think it's really important to just take a minute to just have a look around and look at the people you're commissioning, look at the teams, look at the content of your magazine, and just take stock of where you're at with it. And then at least then in a year's time or 6 months' time, you can say, we've made this or that amount of change. And I think otherwise it's really hard to kind of quantify and actually assess whether the changes that you want to make are working. Otherwise, it's really easy to just kind of say, oh, well, we make a commitment to do this or to do that, and kind of have these sort of vague aspirations. So I think kind of concrete examples are quite important. The other thing I would say, just to Andrea's point about kind of being the spokesperson for all BSME people, which is a term I actually personally really don't like, although I understand why people use it, is I think that it's really important that if you are hiring more people from ethnic minorities as freelancers or as staff, that you don't just get them to write about race. Because I think it's really, really, I think a lot of people, when they're coming into the industry, kind of feel like they have to play that card, for want of a better term, to kind of get their foot in the door. And actually, I think it's really easy to become kind of pigeonholed and kind of stuck in this situation that I don't think anyone wants to be in, where they're kind of primarily writing about the colour of their own skin. And I think that most people would rather write about almost anything else. So I think it's really important that if you are commissioning new people for the first time, that you give them something to write about that is completely, not about who they are as a person, but about what they can do and what they can bring to the table, and maybe the diverse viewpoints that they have, or something that's more than just the way they look or whatever.
Fantastic. And Samantha, what have you done, or what would you suggest is the one thing that you can do?
I think for me, so writing about real estate, when everything happened in the States with George Floyd, I found myself in a position where I have this spot at the beginning of the magazine every week where I get to use my voice and talk to an industry. And I really wanted to say something about Black Lives Matter, but I went through that fear, I guess, that we've talked about here as well. Am I the right person to be talking about this? And I called on some friends and said, should I be saying this, or will it not look real? And they said to me, no, you're exactly the person who should be talking about it, because you have this voice, and it's important for all of us, for allies to really use our voice in the way that it's intended. So in a roundabout way, I guess I'm saying, I think it's incumbent on all of us in any position of power or where we have visibility to talk about the things that we need to change in the world. And so that's what I took away from it. Anyway.
So use your voice, basically. Make sure you use your voice no matter what colour you are. Just use your voice. Talk about it. Thank you. And Busola?
Well, in terms of
what do you think we can do right now? What would you suggest that we can do? Open conversations, make sure we don't just give them specific things to say.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's about conversations. I think it's sort of, I think that people need to get over that embarrassment of discussing race. I mean, there's been so many articles and books and discussions about the fact that we are just particularly bad as a nation at addressing race. I mean, America is very, America has obviously lots of problems in that score, but what it's honest about is like its history, there's a history of slavery, all this sort of stuff. These are all on the table. People know about it, the debates are there, but people are aware. Here, we just don't want to talk about it. So I think that, and that explains why people are just generally uncomfortable as as a brand or a team discussing the issues of race that they may have within their publications. So I think we do need to have that open conversation. But I think we also need to just address, individual biases. We need to look at how we've been performing. We need to look around at our team, our content, our freelancers. Amit raised such a massive point that frustrated me for so long when I was freelance about being approached simply to write about Black issues. I got to the point where I was actually going without money that I desperately needed. And, because I just refused to do it. I thought, and I think commissioning editors need to realize that Black people, sort of can write, or people of color can write about love, can write about relationships, can write about health, can write about all manners of stuff. And we should not be called upon simply to write something that a white person cannot write. It's insulting. So obviously that room for issues to be discussed and which may specifically need a Black voice, but that should be as well as writing about other things. So these are things that, commissioning editors and editors need to be aware of. I mean, it's still a very, very common thing, I'll remember that freelancer. Yeah, we need a feature on this, so I'll call her. And then the rest of the year, you hear nothing from the publication because they don't have a Black feature for you to write about.
In terms of, we've been talking very much about diversity in people to start with. I think we will be doing another webinar on diversity in content as well, but that's not to say we can't touch on it here too. I mean, what impact is it having on A, our audience and who is reading our publications, and B, what we're writing about if we're not diverse? Because obviously it's affecting our industry. If it's primarily not, if it's not BAME that is writing content and the content is not diverse, is it not reaching them as well? So there's that side of it too. Andrea, how do you feel about how your publication perhaps might be tackling diversity in content too?
Well, I mean, since I took over as editor 8 months ago, I've sought to create an atmosphere where diversity just runs through the publication, and it runs through our content and our social channels. It's very important that our first big shoot featured a non-white woman, which is Neelam Gill, talking about racism within our industry. And the features that if you look at the features that we've done on site and our social platforms, you will just see a diversity in terms of visuals, and also in terms of the content as well. And Marie Claire has always been about using your voice and speaking up about issues. But for me, it was very important that we address diversity throughout, always. Obviously, there has been more of that content in recent weeks since the George Floyd incident. However, I think it has always been there, and I do think that it should just be bubbling away. It should be there all the time. There should be, there should be content around a wealth of issues. Since the the Black Lives Matter movement, we have covered that from lots of different perspectives. And, we are more regularly checking ourselves that, any feature that we're doing, we are looking at the different perspectives that we should be taking into account. And I think the team are just more aware of that now. And also they're aware that our audience want to be informed as well, about next steps and what they can do. So, we're filling that space as well.
Thank you. And Amit, I'm presuming that you are consciously thinking about diversity in content when you're commissioning and looking across to your content. Yeah,
absolutely. I think this is something we've kind of always tried to do, and I think that it's particularly important in an industry like tech, which can be very white and very male, to kind of bring people who aren't of that description to the fore. And I think it goes to what we were talking about earlier, kind of about role models. And I think that magazines have a really important job in terms of not necessarily like reflecting society, but in terms of like showing society the way that things maybe should be, or that kind of thing. And I think it's really powerful that if you can, I think if you don't show that diversity in print or in online, then I think you're not really telling the whole story. And I think that's really important. I think it's important to make sure that you work a bit harder to get people from a wider range of backgrounds, because otherwise you're missing out on a whole like broad range of ideas that maybe you wouldn't get otherwise. I think at the end of the day, it's not just about kind of ticking a box or kind of getting lots of different groups in. I think it genuinely makes stuff better, right? It makes the content better. I think we've seen that in so many magazines like recently, where people have come in and made massive differences to particular brands. And I think that's why it's important.
And what about you, Sam, in terms of diversity in content? How are you tackling that side of it?
I think so. In the real estate world, the senior level, which is the level that we write about, predominantly is super white, super male, male pale and stale is what we call them. But we made a concerted effort a little while ago to try and get more female voices in, and I think we need to do the same around people of colour as well. And I think it's a responsibility, particularly for trade magazines, where we're talking to direct to industries, to take some of that on board themselves. So for the female representation, we created a programme to enable more women leaders step forward, and it's meant that in our content we've actually not always gone to the senior person to get that comment. We've gone a little bit lower down to the future leaders, and that has created more diversity in the voices that we get in the magazine and online, and the same is true for making sure that we get representation in terms of people of colour as well. And I'm really proud actually of the issue that we're publishing today, where we have a big section on talent. And because we're not going to the top of the tree, we're talking to people who are just coming into the industry about their experiences. I've looked through those pages, and it is the most diverse issue of EG I've ever seen. And it hasn't been purposely done as an issue to showcase diversity. It's just happened because we've spoken to a much wider group of people. So I think for all of us, it's particularly in business magazines, it's not always to go to the guy at the top of the business. It's to look at the people who are doing the real work, I suppose.
Yeah, the up and coming ones. Busola, I'm going to ask you a specific question actually. Steph McCabe, one of has put a Q&A on the Q&A question. As an events manager, I'm so keen to make our panels and speaker list more diverse. How can we approach BAME speakers without it looking like we're just ticking the boxes? So again, it's that whole kind of like fear or nervousness of opening the conversation.
Well, I think you just need to approach them. I think what is very box ticking like is when you sort of think, right, I've got a panel of 10 people, and I just need to make sure one of them's of colour, and then that's me sorted out. Tick box, I can move on. I think you need to. I think if I know when I'm being approached to tick a box. And I know when I'm being approached because my views and my opinion and my experience is relevant for that discussion. And I think that if you go to someone and there's a genuine reason why you would have them on that panel, and they can see that as well. I don't feel that you need to be worried. I mean, so obviously I work in interiors, and I've been approached by sort of bathroom brands to sort of sit in a panel to sort of discuss a new trend in bathrooms. Now I know that they're not just sort of getting me because I'm black and I will look good on that panel. I know that they actually care about what I've got to say and my experience. So I think that you just need to, I think what's really important is to target the right person and not just sort of think, we need a person of colour in that industry, right? And everyone just goes to the same person all the time. That becomes lazy. So it's just finding the right person and targeting the right person. And I don't, please stop being afraid to sort of, to approach people.
The main message, isn't it? I think that's the main message that everybody's saying. Just make sure you keep that conversation open, all channels open. Andrea, direct question. What advice would you give anyone who's experiencing racism or microaggressions in the workplace? What can you tell them?
I would say to start keeping a log of the incidents, first of all, because certainly in my career I have experienced racism, but it's often it's the sort of stuff that's sometimes like difficult to pinpoint, but then when you see it as a catalogue of several things, you realise exactly what it is. So I would say, keep a catalogue of what's happening, and then go to HR. I mean, I really regret that particularly earlier in my career, I didn't have the confidence to come forward about certain things that I had witnessed. Now I would. It doesn't happen as often, but now I would have that confidence. I think when you're early on in your career, you feel that you don't want to speak up, you don't want to be seen as a troublemaker. You doubt yourself, that maybe it wasn't what you think it was. I think try and find a trusted ally on your team to talk about it with, somebody that you can really trust. And then I think make it an HR issue, call it out for what it is, and take the evidence along and address it head on.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Busola, our default in the hiring process is to alert the usual postgrad course directors about a new role. Yet many of the postgrads come from a very particular demographic. Where should we be looking to diversify? Jamie from Pulse?
I think that there is, we often go to specific, sort of universities or courses because we think the best talent comes from those. I think we just need to broaden our lens. There are lots of places that do, sort of courses in journalism, in our case, sort of interior design. There's a whole load of places that do things. And so we need to broaden our lens and contact not the usual places, but as many places as possible. And then you will get that mix. I think that's the most important thing. I think, people just often just sort of target one or two key places, and then they wonder why they're not getting that diverse mix when there's a whole load of, courses and universities and colleges that should be approached.
As an industry, do you think it's an easy thing to do? It seems to be that, just even from BSME's experience, it's not an easy way to just say, right, I'm going to approach colleges to do that. I think, we almost need somewhere where we can find that information. Or would you recommend anywhere that has it?
I think it's important to have those discussions. I think it's not easy, but no one's saying this is going to be easy. I think we have to make that effort. We have to, we have to source these colleges and these places where we are going to get that diverse mix. It's not easy. Nothing's going to still fall, fall at our lap or on our lap. But we have to make those efforts.
Yeah, and from the BSME perspective, that is definitely something we're looking at in terms of as an education program.
Yeah,
for the end of the year.
Yeah, that's the only way true diversity is going to happen. And there was a point I wanted to make, also just very quickly, that one of the important things about having a diverse team, so we've touched on the hiring aspect, and the people need to be diverse, is that having a diverse team means that it's not just about having a diverse team, but being able to sort of police the content of the magazine, of the publication. I think there's so many tone deaf assumptions that are made in magazines sometimes without realizing that there's a mix of people reading it. I've seen things, sort of talk about, sort of colonial style in the way that it's meant to be accepted, that we all think that colonial style is something to kind of aspire to or something that's great. And there's lots of things that, that passes through. And when you have a team that's not mixed, you can't, some of these things just go through and they go through to print and it's deemed as acceptable. I've been in positions on magazines where I've had to pull up certain things and said, no, that's not on, that needs to be changed. And you can only do that when you have a mix of people working on the publication.
Absolutely, that's great. Thank you. As another question's come in, as Andrea mentioned, I think with content, it's important to make it the norm to see and hear from a variety of people of all colours and backgrounds. But if this is something you're only starting to address, how would you make sure you're not appearing to be tokenistic? I might throw that one to Sam, because obviously that's something you're considering now.
Yeah, I think you have to set yourself a goal that this isn't, it's not just a once in a blue moon. It's something that you do from now on forwards. And I think we did notice that we hadn't been reflective of the industry, or reflective, not of the industry, who probably were reflective of the industry, but not reflective of the population. And I think we have to hold our hand up and say, this might look like it's tokenistic from the first time we do it, but you will see that this is something that will carry on now. This is the way that we are, and say sorry for making a mistake and moving onwards. And I think, as long as you are honest about your own shortcomings, which we all have, then I would hope that people would see it for what it really is.
Thank you. Next question. Ellery Palmer says, sounds like we're all anti-BAME, a nice one-size-fits-all solution for everyone who is not white. But we're also grateful that our companies have created an initiative for us. How do you propose we get rid of this without offending our fellow minorities and saying, I want to focus on your own racist issues? Amit?
I kind of brought this on myself. I haven't had this question. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think the problem with BAME is not... I think that the issue is that different groups within that grouping have really, really different outcomes. And I think that lumping them all together and kind of saying that this approach is going to fix all these problems for all these different groups with different backgrounds is like really reductive and I think quite short-sighted. And I think maybe BAME is kind of a useful like stepping stone to get us to where we need to be to get us to the point where we can say like, okay, people from the Black community need help in this specific area versus people from the Asian community that, don't need as much help in this area, but maybe need more access from this point of view. So, for example, maybe people from the Asian community don't see magazines as a viable career, whereas people from the Black community may see them as a viable career, but not be able to get across the barriers. So can you tailor your approach to kind of help overcome those specific problems that face those specific different groups? And I think BAME, the problem with it is it's really reductive, and it kind of assumes that there's two groups, white and non-white. Actually, that's just not the way that society works. As for a new term to replace it, I don't know. I mean, I was kind of okay with ethnic minority. I think that kind of that does the job. But yeah,
it's tough. Like Andrea, female, trying to break the ceiling. And not BAME or BAME. It's like there's so many.
And I have a problem with the term as well, but I simply don't have a viable alternative at the moment. I totally agree. Everyone has there are different obstacles that each of those people face. And I think in 2020 to almost categorise them all as like minorities when 40% of people in the UK, 40% of people in London at the moment are of mixed or BAME heritage, but it's a huge, it's not a minority, and it's not lots of little, it's a big consideration of a huge section of our population that's not white, with their their own different barriers and interests and preoccupations. And I think we should address that. Again, it comes down to an ignorance as well. You know, it's about people being more informed about these communities and in their own right.
Yeah, agreed. I think, you know, if I was to say to each of you, what's your one takeaway from this conversation, or what would you suggest people go away with one piece of informed information of what to do? If I start with Busola, what would you say? What's your takeaway?
I think just looking at the team you're working, you know, your brand, looking at your team, looking at your content, looking at the managers who hire, and seeing where you can do better. You know, because we can all do better, and you know, we would not be having this conversation if, you know, our magazines were doing well on this subject. So I think that, you know, everyone everyone just needs to go away and look at their specific situations and where they can make changes.
Thank you, Sam. What's your one takeaway?
I would say take responsibility and act, whether that's through how we hire, what the pages of our magazines look like, just do something, take responsibility. Thank you.
Amit?
Yeah, I think that, you know, just try a bit harder. And I think there are people out there that you can find, and you know, you should do this not just because it kind of means that your magazine will reflect society better, or it will help people from less represented groups kind of get into the industry, but because it will genuinely make the content better. I think that's the real takeaway. You know, we're doing this, yes, because it's the right thing to do, but also because it will make the product better, I think, in the end.
Thank you. And Andrea?
I just think let's break the stigma about talking about race. Let's make it something that we discuss in our workplaces and with our friends, with a view to making long-lasting, systematic change instead of being scared to discuss it.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, guys. We've gone slightly over, but I think it was worth doing so. And I probably want to say I want to invite you all back and talk about diversity and content in far more detail, perhaps something again soon. So I hope you all enjoyed today's session. Do keep an eye on our website and socials for news about our next webinar. We also hope you enjoy the talent awards that we did last week, and congratulations again to all the shortlisters and the winners. Thanks for entering, everyone. And we're going to have our annual main awards opening up soon, so do watch out for notifications on that through Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter. Thank you again to Busola Evans, Associate Editor and Supplements Editor of Livingetc and Homes and Gardens, Amit Katwala, Senior Editor of Wired UK, Samantha McClary, Editor of Estates Gazette, and Andrea Thompson, Editor-in-Chief of Marie Claire. Thank you also to the BSME team behind the scenes and the screens, including our recently graduated BA students from Roehampton University, Phoebe and Jasmina. And also, thanks again just from me. It's been a terrific session. I was nervous, I have to say, about doing it, but I think as a whole it's gone well, and I'm really appreciative of all the comments. BSME itself is looking at how it can look at the education side of stuff, certainly for the future. In September, we're looking at creating things like mentorship programs and but obviously the pandemic's had a bit of an impact on everything. So watch this space, and we hope that we will be able to introduce some new things in September. But thanks again, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.